A Christian politician is under fire in one of the most bizarre legal battles in the world right now. Her name is Paivi Rasanen, and I just want you to imagine for a moment that you are facing potential jail time. Just think about this, or massive fines for simply sharing what you believe on a controversial issue. Maybe sharing a Bible verse, let's say, or perhaps just putting a pamphlet together with your thoughts on something like maybe biblical marriage. Well, that's exactly what is going on with Paivi Rasanen. It's a total nightmare. It's like it was taken from an Alfred Hitchcock script. And here she is, Miss Rasanen. She's a member of the Finnish parliament, and she also previously served as the nation's interior secretary. So this is a person who has deep roots in the political movements of Finland. Now, she was brought up on hate crimes charges for simply expressing her Christian beliefs. Now, if you haven't heard about this story, bear with me because it's truly bizarre. This is a situation, again, it didn't happen in communist China. It didn't happen in North Korea. It happened in the middle of Finland. Okay, a very free country as far as we know. Apparently, when it comes to this case, not so much. But the irony, of course, is that so many people around the world on the progressive side, they have said that, look, even though we've had cultural and social changes on issues surrounding marriage, there won't be any punishment. Nobody's going to go after Christians. You know, when Christians have raised these concerns, a lot of the liberal talking heads have said, look, you've got nothing to worry about. You're being absurd. You're being paranoid. That will never happen. And yet here we are. Here we are with this slippery slope where you have somebody being brought up on charges, okay, potentially facing jail time because she shared her views on biblical marriage. Now, she has spent, Miss Rasanen, years in court now fighting criminal charges against her. And again, this has to do with her views on Christianity. What did she do? Let's just start there, because a lot of people are saying, well, maybe she was harassing people and being, horrible to other people. And look, I believe in free speech. So even if somebody is saying something you don't agree with or you don't like, or you think it's quote unquote mean, well, you've got free speech and religious freedom to say and do those things within reason. So, okay, here's what Miss Rasanen was guilty of. On June 17th, 2019, she tweeted text from Romans 1:24-27. Okay, so she tweeted Bible verses, and those Bible verses sparked a criminal investigation. Those tweets were then paired with a pamphlet that she wrote on traditional marriage 20 years ago, and that added more fuel to the fire. So she wrote a pamphlet about biblical marriage, defending it, man and a woman. She shared Bible verses, and then media interview, at least one media interview that she did, was sort of brought into this case against her, and suddenly she's being accused of hate speech, 3 hate speech charges that put her at risk for 2 years behind bars potentially. That was the worst case scenario. Now, here's the interesting thing. She has not backed down from defending herself. So it's been years now. This started in 2019. Here we are in 2024. We've got 5 years now that this has been going on. A court of appeal just in November, not that long ago, unanimously dismissed the charges against her. That was the second time she won her legal battle. So here you have a prosecutor bringing charges against her over Bible verses and a pamphlet, okay? And she's won that battle twice. This last win in the Helsinki Court of Appeal was unanimous. Everybody agreed with her. All the judges agreed with her. And so we thought that the case might be over. But of course, you would assume, all right, look, this prosecutor, they've got to be thoroughly humiliated. They've lost 2 cases now on preposterous charges, and they decided to appeal. They are appealing to Finland's Supreme Court. So the legal battle is not over. They are apparently not embarrassed enough. They want to be further humiliated. But of course, what they're trying to do is win. They want to win at the Supreme Court, obviously. So this means that if the Supreme Court takes her case up, then she has to go back to court and fight again. Now, she told me recently, Miss Rasanen, that she was shocked to learn that the prosecutor was appealing and taking her back to court. But she said that she is prepared to defend her innocence again, and she is undeterred in her fight for ideological freedom. Now, there's a high chance the court will take her case up, according to her lawyers, because this is a big case. It's one that's made international headlines, and it has a lot of implications for those living in Finland. So she believes there's a strong precedent that, based on what we've seen in the past, both Rasanen and her attorneys that this case will be picked up. Now, I have to say that her passion here for the gospel and for her willingness to stand up, these are two things that we need to say, look, this is a brave person. A lot of people would say, I'm going to fold, I'm going to apologize, I don't want to go to court, I don't want to have the international furor and rage from all sorts of different people directed at me. And yet, Rasanen has continued to defend her rights. But here's what I want to say about this case. I think it's one of the most terrifying cases in the world right now, and it's frightening because I think it sends a warning to conservatives and Christians. These are people who have sounded an alarm again and again on where our culture is going and how that will affect them. And I'm a Christian, so I'll say us, how it will affect us. Stating our views, simply saying what we believe, and being punished for it. And so when you take all of this and you look at the fact that so many progressives are silent on this should not be a Christian, non-Christian, us versus them situation. This is a freedom situation. There is damage being done to Miss Rasanen's rights. There is damage being done to everybody's rights here, particularly in the West. When you look at what is happening, the fact that more progressives are not speaking out in defense of her, I've seen people defending on social media what is happening to her, which is completely unbelievable. You should be an atheist and able to see that this is an assault on free speech, that this is terrifying. Now, I will without a doubt say that Ms. Rasanen's ongoing legal plight is one of the most significant, if not the most significant, court battles unfolding in the world right now. You have tyrannical powers all over the world trying to eradicate anyone with whom they disagree. I mean, this is the assault on free speech that we have seen again and again. It just gets worse. And the implications for this case, they don't only impact Finland, but it goes way beyond Europe, way beyond the West. This is an incredibly important battle. And so we need to be praying for Ms. Rasanen as she is potentially put on trial again. But I want to just let people know this isn't just, as we conclude here, this is not just about her. It's not just about her rights. It's not just about all of our collective rights. She is not the one on trial here. What is on trial is the Bible itself. The truth in Scripture itself is under assault from a secular and ever-meandering culture, one that is less concerned with rights and more concerned with an obsession with the self, so much so that emotion clouds everything, including good judgment. As we know, freedom for me and none for thee, it never ends well for anyone. And at this point, we've got liberty hanging in the balance. So let's take a stand, pray, and speak out for freedom and liberty for all. Now, in our next segment here, we are going to be talking with Bob Fu. I had him on months ago, but I want to bring this conversation back because this is an important conversation about what is happening in China. We're talking about persecution in the West right now with Paivi Rasanen, but what is happening under China's Communist Party is incredibly disturbing. A story that we heard earlier in the year last year, actually around the middle of the year, about a pastor who was undergoing some pretty horrific treatment from the Communist Party in China. We're going to break that down and talk about Bob Fu's story. Bob is the president of ChinaAid, and really just an incredible story that he went through in China, and now he is working to fight persecution. So with no further ado, here is Bob Fu. Bob, there's a disturbing story out of China right now about a pastor and his wife, and they've been hit with massive fines over, purportedly illegal religious activity. Can you tell us what's happening in this story?
Yes, Bill. Pastor Yang Xibo and his wife, they were fined by the Chinese government back in 2021 for basically leading their house church without being registered in the Chinese Communist government. And they have been fighting it ever since. Of course, the communist government just keep escalating their fines from like 200,000 now to 400,000. It's like 80,000 almost US dollars. Yeah.
Wow. And so they recently doubled this fine. And as you mentioned, this has been going on now for a couple of years. Now, before we get into a little bit more of their story and their church's story, can you define, because I think there are some people who are watching or listening, and the term house church and this idea of registering with the government, especially in the West, it would seem very foreign to people because they don't know what is a house church and what is the official policy of the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to churches needing to be registered.
Bill, they used to be the Chinese government sanctioned, registered, so-called Three Self-Patriotic Movement Church, were supposedly protected under the government regulations. Of course, the pastors and all their properties belong to the Communist Party control, and especially after the current president took power, he basically launched the so-called Sinicization campaign. Essentially, it's anyone in the government-sanctioned church who refuse to uh, make their faith compatible with the socialism and communism, who do not pledge their absolute dedication and loyalty to President Xi Jinping and his own thoughts first, would be also under scrutiny and even suffering imprisonment. But the vast majority of the Chinese church chose not to register under the Chinese Communist Party's government, since essentially, if you register, then the head of the church will become the Chinese Communist Party, Religious Affairs Bureau, United Front Working Department of the Communist Party, and now you have to put President Xi Jinping, the Communist Party leader's portrait, at the pulpit of the church. And every morning, you have to raise the Chinese Communist flag at the parking lot of the church, and all the crosses on the rooftop of the church building are regarded as the national security threat and are forcefully removed, destroyed, and burned down. So that's why the majority of the Chinese church just refused to join this CCP controlled body called the Three Self Patriotic Movement. And
What
they
happens?
chose to
What
be
happens?
independent. Yeah.
Yeah, what happens if, because the majority of the church has not joined, right? And when you describe the terms you just described, it's understandable why they have not joined. What happens when those house churches and those Christians are found gathering or discovered meeting typically? What is the punishment for that?
Well, the punishment, just like we just mentioned, Pastor Yang Xibo and his wife and many hundreds of thousands of house church leaders had been under the nonstop persecution over the years. And remember, Pastor Yang and their church, Xun Siding Church at Xiamen City, a coastal city in east coast of China, had they existed for several generations. Of course, they had been under various degrees persecution over the years, and Pastor Yang is the fourth generation of Christians, and his auntie, his father, had suffered over 15 years imprisonment for being house church leadership in their moment. And so many churches had been declared illegal, which means that they will suffer constant raid by the police, and the pastors would be arrested, sentenced, and many, like Pastor Wang Yi from Early Rain Covenant Church, is serving 9 years imprisonment for preaching the Gospel of John 3:16, for calling President
Wow.
Xi to stop his persecution and offering him, of course, the free grace of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's called subversion of state power. And Bill, in recent months, there has been a very intensive campaign, basically declared all the house church leaders committing financial fraud by uh, uh, by basically declaring the tithing and offering as a financial fraud, and several churches like the Abundance Evangelical Church, they were even fined for attending a Zoom meeting, and multiple
Wow.
pastors receive already criminal sentences recently with this so-called financial fraud charge. And in several churches, such as like Xi'an City in Shanxi province, the two youth pastors recently were sentenced to 3.5 years and 3 years with heavy fines from 60,000 to 8,000. I mean, basically, the public security officials uh, tortured the believers and made them make false confession that claiming falsely that they were giving their tithing and offerings under kind of a coercion. So that's how this so-called financial fraud charge has come about. So you can expect there will be a lot of pastors in the very near future are going to be sentenced for long years imprisonment, depending on how much the collected offerings over the years the church had received.
As you're going through this, it feels so unimaginable to those of us who enjoy First Amendment freedoms. And, there's a lot going on in the West right now when it comes to religious freedom and religious liberty. But what you're describing is really a dystopian nightmare for believers. And yet you have in this situation, the pastor and his wife that we are speaking about here, they, according to your organization, ChinaAid, they have come out and said that they're not planning on paying that fine, and that they're really pushing back on this. And in light of what you just described, that seems like an incredibly bold stance to take. I mean, can you reflect on that at all? Just seeing them really speak out on this in such a powerful way in light of what is at stake.
Yes, Bill. I mean, we at ChinaAid had covered this new wave of persecution extensively in our annual persecution report. And religious freedom is at the worst point that it's been since Chairman Mao and its Cultural Revolution in 1960s. So we have seen, I think, the Chinese church are facing a similar degree of persecution, more like its neighboring country, North Korea, for Kim Jong Un. And yet, despite of the persecution, as you just mentioned, Bill, the Chinese church, especially the independent house churches, are still very strong and even continue to grow in the middle of this persecution. I mean, look, before the Chinese Communist Party took power in 1949, there were nearly just 1 million Christians in China. And now, with the 70 years under CCP's rule, non-stop persecution, and even now escalating, the estimated number of Chinese Christians, by all accounts and experts, has already reached to over 100 millions. I mean,
Wow.
100 million Christians already in China. And I heard like some encouraging story, like Pastor Yang, after received the double fine because of their independence in the house church. And he started thanking the Lord. He said, uh, we know that because we do not have our own, much private property. We have nothing to give to the government, and so thank the Lord for the recent fine. I mean, another pastor, I mean, a Christian, actually, a lady. She was after she was arrested from the Early Rain Covenant Church. the police asked her, why, you love Jesus so passionately, and when did that happen? And she said, I only began to love the Lord passionately after you arrested me, when the shackles worn out my feet deeply. I realized a little how much Christ had paid for me. And so
Wow.
this kind of the unwavering perseverance and the spirit the suffering in Christ is glory. I think that is the biblical theme they are living out in the Chinese house church movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see how faith thrives under persecution in so many ways. And yet, it takes a boldness. A lot of us in the West complain about faith and the things that are happening. And yet you see believers who are willing to sacrifice everything for their faith. And you're seeing that faith grow throughout China and other areas of the world. I have to ask you about a couple of other issues related to this. And I'd love to get your take on how reliable the reporting is on this, but there are two claims in particular, one in which the Chinese Communist Party has been purportedly attempting to sort of reframe and rewrite the Bible in its own image, essentially. And when you talk about church control, right, with the government controlling churches and making them register, that story is interesting. But there's also the other claim of this app in one of the provinces that people need to register on the app before they go to church, essentially. So I wanted to ask you about those reports because both are incredibly disturbing.
Yes, Bill. I mean, these two measures, one is try to retranslate the Bible by making the Bible and the commentaries compatible with the socialism, communism thoughts. And the other version is at least in Henan province, it's called the Jerusalem of China, with the most populated Christians in that province. They started this so-called smart religion app, with which every Christians, before they can even go to a worship service, they have to upload all their personal ID information, their contact information, their family information, and before they even can locate a worship location to go, if you go to a government sanctioned church. So these are measures that CCP under the current leader really try to so-called synthesize religion, with the real purpose is to erase Christianity from the map of China. I mean, basically, if you change Bible, the biblical teaching, by make your doctrine compatible with socialism teaching, and in one instance already, one part of the translation was revealed. They rewrite the story of Jesus, when those Pharisees caught that adultery woman, and the Communist Party's version translated into, at the end of the day, Jesus killed that woman, and declare himself as also illegal. So that is what the Communist Party tried to do, is to really change the doctrine to become essentially a socialism teaching with religious clothes. So we have seen, of course, the Communist Party try to even uh, delete the Ten Commandments, like the first commandments is deemed as not compatible with the presidency's thoughts. So Ten Commandments became nine commandments. So these are two stories. So we're still, of course, wait and see the new socialism version of the Bible to come out.
And
And
that would be the only, just so people understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, when that is completed, that would be the only available version of the Bible in those registered churches, I would assume then, right? Would that be accurate?
Oh, yes. I mean, the Communist Party, of course, had made everything, try to uh, uh, deny access to already, to the millions of Chinese children to the scripture. I mean, the unfortunately those e-commerce companies such as the Apple company had volunteered to comply with the Communist Party's order by removing all the Bible apps and Bible-related apps from billions of Chinese Apple phone users in China. So you cannot find that Bible app at all. And if you download anything from about the Bible or Bible-related apps by breaking the CCP's firewall, internet firewall, then it's deemed as a criminal activity, and you could be arrested. There is a cyber religious law had already taken effect, make these kind of activities as criminal activities.
Bob, I want to thank you for going through. I mean, I want to have you back to go through so much more, because we only scratched the surface of what is happening right now in China. Your organization is ChinaAid. You do wonderful work shedding light on what is happening in China when it comes to persecution. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Oh, thank you, Bill, for having me.
That's all for today's Higher Ground with Billy Hallowell. Make sure you head over to Washington Times and Higher Ground for more news, podcasts, and so much more. We'll see you again next week.